Australia is a country full of unsung heroes, most of whom choose to fly under the radar because they think what they've achieved in life is no big deal. But on this episode of Everyday Greatness, we're going to tell some of those stories. The stories of incredible, powerful Australians who all just happen to be women. Our guest today is Carolyn Wood-Watson, a former Sydney AFL volunteer and coach who would never say as much, but was one of the essential cogs in the wheel of creating the AFL women's competition. Like most other unsung Australian heroes, Carolyn just quietly went about her business at the UTS Bats AFL club, doing the best job she could to help make the environment around her a happy one for her club mates. There's quite rightly a lot of hype around professional women's sport these days, but none of it has magically conjured itself out of nowhere. It's thanks to the accumulation of all of the hard work that people like Carolyn have done in their local clubs to get women's sport onto the pedestal it now sits. It's quite fitting then that this interview is taking place in the Sydney Swans' new headquarters at the Royal Hall of Industries in Moore Park, ahead of the Swans AFLW team's second season. A lot of those young ladies will never have heard of Carolyn Wood-Watson, but she's a huge reason why they have the incredible opportunities they have today as professional Australian sportspeople. She might have always wanted to remain an unsung hero, but today we're going to sing her praises. Carolyn Wood-Watson, thank you for joining us on Everyday Greatness, and buckle up for some praise singing.
Thank you for having me.
So paint a picture of what women's sport looked like in Australia while you were coaching AFL teams.
Okay, look, my history goes back really 2 decades. Back in the early 2000s, I started out in junior clubland, grassroots football out in Sydney West. And from there, obviously learning how community football operates, I got a job as a development officer for the AFL, New South Wales ACT, which was very big at that time to get women in, and then followed that actually becoming development manager for Western Sydney. So, back in that time, AFL for women, or really for girls, finished at under 12.
Yeah.
The women at under 12.
So when you became a coach, how brave were you in your team selections in terms of sexual equality? Did you pick females in leadership positions over men, and how did umpires around them react?
Well, in the early days with the juniors, gender, as far as I was concerned, had no place. It made no difference. So yes, I had one team with 3 girls. I had a team the following year with 1 player. I would say that initially I used to like to get every player to play every position on the field to give them gameplay understanding. I guess throw a curveball to the umpires every now and then by having my girls as captains.
And how did the umpires react?
Back under 10, I'm going to say I had 3 girls in a team. We were in the semi-finals. I had one of my parents suggest to me that there was an additional player from the opposition on the ground. So, very carefully, I had every parent probably 7 or 8 times count, because, of course, if you call a player count and you're wrong, the scoreboard gets stripped back to whatever it was at the previous quarter. And sure enough, sent my captain out to the umpire to say that we believed there was another extra player on the ground for the opposition. Yeah. And the umpire came and reprimanded me afterwards, saying that only the captain could approach the umpires, and I asked him to show me who my captain was. And, of course, he couldn't, and so I called her up, and there it was.
Very cool story. So how difficult was it for a woman as a coach and for the women you were coaching? How was it for you guys back in the day in a very male-dominated landscape of AFL football?
Yeah, it was hard. I guess first up I'd say thank you to AFL New South Wales ACT for giving me and other women down the track the opportunity. We were the first state to have 2 female development managers, myself for Western Sydney and Sandra Habley down in Sydney Southwest. But it was difficult. I mean, there was a lot of Greater Western Sydney was NRL country, so very few AFL parents or coaches present. To be a Kiwi who had never played AFL, it didn't exist in my country when I was growing up, and by the time I came here I would have been too old to play it anyway had it existed. So it was. I found that, I don't know, a dad who had been a soccer dad all of his life, even though I was then working for the AFL as an accredited level 2 coach, often found it harder to try and get positions with older teams because they felt that the boys needed a man to pull them into line, or, I don't know. It was a very interesting time. Not always
so.
Negative, but very interesting.
Yeah.
Actually, sorry, go on.
Sorry, no, carry on.
No, look, I was just going to throw in there, talking about my level 2. New South Wales and WA were very welcoming, and Queensland. And WA also had a development manager as a female. But I went to a national conference, and there was 300 of us there, and 17 women in the room, and only 3 of us were development staff. The rest were office or corporate or partnerships. And I had a gentleman from South Australia across the table from me saying to me, what do you do? And I said, I'm a development manager. And he said, well, you must be a different type of development manager to me. And I said, well, what do you do? And he said, well, I coach. And I said, well, so do I. And he said, I umpire. And I said, well, so do I. And he said, I go into schools and train, primary school and high school. I'm like, well, so do I. And, my colleague at the time, a chap called Dean Connors, was sitting beside me, and he said he could literally see the steam coming out of my ears as I'm trying to explain to this man, that, I don't know, New South Wales really was quite a developed state in the AFL direction. So
yeah, it's a different world. Thank God.
Different world, yeah.
When you first got involved in AFL,
Yep.
even though you're a Kiwi and had no idea what the hell it was,
but I loved it.
did you have an end goal in mind? Did you get in thinking, I want to help create a professional women's league? Or did you just get in to give it the best crack you could?
Okay, so initially when I started, I was a Swans member back in those days, and I loved the sport. I had moved to live out in the Blue Mountains, and some of the young clubs were just starting up. So I actually got involved to ensure that my boys had a club to play in, and the code that I loved. So it was a little bit, a personal thing going on there. But no, I did go to... There was a pioneering group, I guess, of women back then. Now we're talking 2003, 2004. Balmain springs to mind, Bondi. That there was a women's competition really struggling, really trying to get on its feet. But of course, because girls finished at under 12s, there was no feeder group. So it was about them trying to attract and retain, and they had a tough time. But no, I got involved. I loved the concept of women playing football. I was heavily involved in getting recreational football for women up and happening in Blacktown, trying to attract women to the game, number one. Secondly, from working in the primary schools predominantly with the AFL, I came to learn that a lot of the mums made the final decision about what sport their kids played. So I thought if I could work on the mums, I'm going to get the girls or the mums of the future, sort of work it through that way. So there was definitely a drive behind it, but, they were very, very early days. It wasn't even on the table back then.
Yeah, fair enough. So I said in the introduction that you were one of the essential cogs in there being a professional AFLW competition. Do you take any credit for there being a professional comp, or were you just doing what you thought was best and that happened afterwards?
Yeah, for me it was just the love of the game. So whether it was male or female, in the time that I was development manager, it was about getting a second team into New South Wales. Not even a women's team, a second male team. So, we were trying to drive enough interest in, a lot of parents followed league, a lot of kids played soccer. The Blue Mountains Springwood Soccer Club was the biggest in the area. So we were trying to generate enough interest to bring in children to play, to then go into the senior clubs, then into the Sydney AFL, to actually then generate enough interest to bring in a second men's team. So, do I take credit for it? No. Did we all, all of us, all of the staff on the ground of the development teams, Sydney, Southwest, Western Sydney, we were all working 7 days a week, working our hearts out to make it happen. So, yeah, love of the game.
Yeah, you might be too modest to say you'll help make it, but I think you are one of the essential reasons why these young ladies who are in professional sport can play professional sport.
Thank you. That's a very big call. Thank you.
Lady. What a humble,
very humble lady. Now,
lady.
I want to pass over to Scotty Gibbons to ask a few more questions.
Oh, how many have I got? I hope you're here for the rest of the night. So when you were finishing high school, could you dream of doing anything you wanted, or did you have to maybe temper your ambition because you were a woman?
Look, I'm going to say it didn't affect me. I'm still trying to figure out what I do when I grow up. It didn't affect me. I wanted to do what I wanted to do, and I don't think gender should ever come into it.
So you were, even before the advent of all of this, you were just brave. You were just forging ahead as you, not as defined by anybody else.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, even going to work for the AFL and applying for the job, I was any woman that applied for the job. And, we were getting interviewed out at Penrith Golf Course, and I'm watching these young fellas who were obviously football players or retiring football players out west going for, at that point, development officer status. And as I say, I've turned up, yes, okay, I'm club secretary, junior football club, ground manager on weekends, uniform officer. I learnt every potential aspect of junior grassroots clubland. Plus I was a mum of 2 young primary school students. So I guess I fit the mould of, I knew both landscapes.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, I was absolutely thrilled to bits to be accepted by the AFL.
Wow. So today, can young girls dream of doing anything they want? Even though you forged it solo, have you spread that seed, if you will, so that they all have that same ability now? I'd
hope so. You mentioned earlier, Barnaby, so I just spent, not just spent, in 2017-16, coaching AFLW at UTS, and I got involved in that because I was helping out coaching at the academy in Matraville, having had a few years off AFL. But look, I've always believed that the more knowledge you have, the more confidence you have, the more resilience you have. Dream big and go for it.
So as a person, having done some delving and seen some of your credentials and certificates of glory and whatnot, you are a genuine superstar, and humble at it, but you are a superstar. Like you've done. You're a foundation member of the AFLW. You're a national coaching. You've got your national coaching
Level
accreditation
twice. Yeah.
You've got a recognition for your contribution to the sport from AFL themselves. Mm-hmm. You were nominated for Volunteer of the Year. These are huge accolades. And there is more that I could go through, but we've got limited time.
Yeah.
And then you had a Coach of the Year nomination.
I did. I don't take it. I don't take it that way. I think that if you love something and you do it with a passion, it's very easy to just go through the motions and do it. And it's also, I think, very easy to inspire other people. I loved the game. So by the time I'm going into primary school to say to, there was one school out in Penrith that had 600 students, and I wanted that school. And it was an NRL school, and I wanted that school. Mm-hmm. And because that would grow at least 3 clubs who were in the area. So you had the St Clair Crows, you had Penrith Swans, you had Glenmore Park Lions. And I knew if I could get those kids in, and I would ring them and email them and fax them, and, you know, Paul Kelly Cup and Auskick clinics. And I finally turned up one day, and I said to the lady, I'm in my AFL uniform, and she said to me, no, look, we don't do AFL here. And I just said, please, give me 5 minutes with your principal, because I believe that all children should be exposed to all sports. Can we just maybe let the kids have a shot? Can I just come here and just show them the Auskick backpack and tell them about an after-school centre that I'm running, and they can come. And the principal actually walked out and he said to me, you're Carolyn Watson, aren't you? And I said, how do you know? And he said, I'm just so sick of getting your emails and your faxes, and I'm only here to get rid of you. And he actually let me do an after-school centre, which was fantastic, and we had about 100 kids come out of that. A lot converted into clubland, and I guess I get the greatest joy out of the smallest things, but I converted that school and we ran a PDHP program 3 years later. So it was like, yeah, my big win.
So persistence beats resistance.
It does, persistence.
Sure does.
And then turn up. Never take no for an answer. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned that when you're passionate about something, that it's all-encompassing. So now you've got this photography bug. Yeah,
I do. I do this actually as a hobby. I am studying, well, it connects and it doesn't connect, but I'm studying counselling. I decided, at 57 that what do I love the most? I have spent so many years working with kids and young people and seen a lot of the struggles that they go through and some unfortunate outcomes as a result of that. And I believe that basically our minds are kaleidoscopes and we are so multifaceted, and to find a hobby or a passion or something that you love. For me, it's photography. I'm in the lens, I'm lost for hours, and it gives me my calm space. So some people meditate, I take photos.
So what's your favourite?
Architecture.
Architecture.
Yeah, I love buildings, In fact, my favourite thing to do is look up. And I think in a world of technology, everyone's looking at their hands or looking at the ground, and even in the city, I'm constantly looking at the buildings around me, and I say to people, "Oh my gosh, look at that!" Well, look at them. Like, how are you even seeing that? I'm just like, because I like to look up. So, yeah,
you're seeing
it grounds me. Yeah.
So, what camera gear do you use?
I've got a Nikon.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Good you.
Yeah.
Good you. So there's got to be, I would reckon, that you've discovered, if you will, some unsung heroes that haven't been recognised.
100%. Yeah.
Who would they be?
Look, if we're talking women, I'm going to go back to my earlier days in the AFL, and I'm going to go back to a lot of those junior clubs. So Gina Smith was Hawkesbury Saints president. Julie Diamond was St Clair's Crow Committee. Lynn Bryden was Penrith Swans secretary. Ros Thomas, Blue Mountains Kangaroos, Auskick. And Christine Burrows was regional umpire manager. And those women, without a doubt, were, I guess, it was almost a sorority even with me. Like they were happy to see a woman suddenly working for the AFL. They were happy to see a woman who had kids in school that could help run the programs with them, for them, support them. I could go into, our offices were out at Homebush, but I could go out to all of those men who were footballers, some of them with families, some of them not with families, and I could say, hey, this is what's going on at grassroots level with, these mums are getting involved and they are running clubs. They were running clubs, and they didn't get the glory they deserved, but they were really key players. And I guess if we're talking AFL world as opposed to clubland, I would name people like Craig Davis, obviously, first CEO of AFL New South Wales ACT. Simon Wilson, Billy Webb, Mick Clift, Raylene Perkins. Again, we were
You're
working in a...
so generous. Those names are just popping straight out of your head.
But they were people as I say, we worked so hard. We were all clubland people and AFL people. We were, we were literally 7 days a week. We were doing our work at work during the day, during the working week. And then, as I say, for myself, if I can talk about me just for a moment, I would just say that there I am, then training in junior clubland, Tuesdays and Thursdays, and running Auskick Gala days on Sunday, and taking my team to play on Saturday. So my house was literally full of AFL gear, which my sons thought was paradise.
So if we summarised it and we said, you're a superstar, you're very generous, you're very passionate, and you're humble.
You're very kind.
And you're humble. So what would be your proudest moment, your proudest achievement, whether it be coaching, whether it be recruiting, what would be that one thing that you put up on a pedestal and say, gee, I'm glad I did that?
With my regional manager at the time, I helped turn the turf with then Premier Maurice Yema of the new Blacktown Stadium to bring in
Seriously?
the Giants. Yeah.
That's you.
And I've got a photo in that.
Yeah, I got a photo.
So,
hey, we're on podcast and you can't see it, but I can.
So for me, it was being, I was hitting the KPIs. I was growing the team, growing the game. So, I was very happy.
Fabulous. Well, that's about it from Barnaby and me in terms of questions. But now we're just going to give you a couple more, because I know Barnaby's got a question for you.
I have a big one being at the Sydney Swans headquarters.
Yes.
So the Swans AFLW team didn't win a game last year.
Yep.
But all of the media and people around the club keep calling it a really successful year. How can you have a successful season as a football club without winning a game?
I would say two reasons jump to me straight away. One, that the Swans have entered a team in AFLW, and that is such a win for New South Wales. And the fact that the Swans joined, 5 years after the initiation of the game. So they were behind the 8 ball anyway, and everyone's got to start somewhere. So I think it's fantastic, yeah.
Very true. Couldn't agree more.
We're running out of time, Barnaby.
We are running out of time, and I will wrap it up, but I just want to sing your praises.
Before you do,
thank you so much.
I just a very quick little one on this, because I know you've been studying counselling and you've previously worked in mental health. So are there any lessons you've learnt that would translate to helping the kids today to have a healthy mind?
Yeah, kids and sport, if we're talking that, mental health, it's a no-brainer. Get out there for that walk. It teaches resilience, it teaches teamwork, it's, time management with training, just endorphins. I'm a great believer that if a kid can't run down the field and kick a footy, at least go for a walk around the block, because it will change your world. Yeah.
Good you. Well, thank you, Carolyn, for joining us. I can say it's been a pleasure, but it's actually been uplifting. It's really been uplifting sitting with you, because you're unassuming. You're a real Aussie, even if you're a Kiwi. But you're a real Aussie because it's AFL. There we go with that. We've got to say thank you also to the ARA Group for being our major sponsor for the 6th year in a row. 6 years. It's fabulous. Thanks for listening. We hope we've helped make you proud of just being an everyday Joe or Joanne Burger Donuts. Hey, you can listen to Everyday Greatness next week, where we'll continue today's conversation with Amanda Ferrugia, the inaugural captain of the GWS Giants AFLW side and 3-time Mostyn medalist. That's just going to be great. So she won that for the best and fairest player in the AFL, Sydney Women's AFL. We'll also talk to Amanda about what it means to have the opportunities that young women today have to be a professional sports person. And we hope you can join us for that one. But if you want to find out more about the show, all you've got to do is go to Everyday Greatness page. Go to barnabyhowarth.com.au. That's barnabyhowarth.com.au. And you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and LinkedIn and all of those. But thank you for listening today. Thank you, Carolyn. You are just a megastar. I did start off with superstar, but you've soared past that. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Hey, this is Scott Gibbons and Barnaby Howarth. We'll see you next time.